upgrades to the system as capital improvements to make sure that we allow for that economic development expansion in the future. So as I mentioned, we installed eight gauges over the course of 4 months between September and January. We do that to capture wet weather flow, which is flow when it rains, and dry weather flow when the ground is frozen. And we do that so that we can measure potential inflow and infiltration in the system, which can be a really critical factor when analyzing sanitary sewer. We also do that to develop what's called a diurnal curve, which is essentially measuring the pattern of sanitary discharge throughout the course of the day. So for instance, in the residential areas, as you may expect, you'll see a peak in the morning and a peak in the afternoon when everyone's getting ready for work and when everyone comes home from work. With commercial areas, it's maybe the sanitary flow window is during the hours of operation. And depending on the type of land use, the number of employees, whether it's a hotel, all of those things have different factors that kind of lend itself to that developing that diurnal curve. So when we measure flow, we can develop custom diurnal curves for the city of Forest Lake, and then apply those to other areas in our model. So that's a little technical, but what we're getting at here is that it's really important to understand those flow patterns to have an accurate assessment of the system. Okay, so from that, then we develop this calibrated model, and we can understand the current system capacity. I'll talk about that here in a little bit as well. And then we can then apply the 2040 land use scenarios, or really any number of land use change scenarios, to analyze the system under the current pipe size, but future flow conditions. And when we change land use, we have the potential to not only change the magnitude of flow, that is, it could be increase or decrease based on land uses, employees, housing, et cetera, or the pattern. As we talked about before, residential and commercial have much different patterns. Also, weekend versus weekday patterns are much different, especially when we have tourism and other things near the lake. And so the monitoring and tracking those types of patterns are really important too. And then we can reassess the current system and then make some proposed solutions based on that capacity. And what we found in our modeling was that there are a handful of areas out in the residential zone, so away from downtown, that have some system capacity issues, but they're mostly related to slope of pipe. So as the slope of the pipe goes from steep to shallow, the amount of capacity that pipe is able to accommodate goes down. And so in some situations, the pipe may have been constructed at a much shallower depth. Maybe those systems are much older as well, that don't necessarily follow today's current design standards. And so we've identified those pipes that are maybe seeing some capacity issues based on slope. They don't necessarily cause system-wide impacts, and we can relate those back to CIP projects in the future. And so if there's a road reconstruct that's set to occur in the next 5 or 10 years, it's a good idea to maybe take a look at those pipe systems in the residential areas and make those fixes at that time. The other areas that we're looking at really are the two downtown regions. You can see those adjacent to the lake. One is the red circle on the north of the figure, and then the yellow circle. I'm going to zoom into the yellow circle in the next slide, but we're really seeing some potential capacity issues in those two areas. The red circle on the north is of particular concern because there's a lift station, a sanitary flow lift station at the north end of that run, that may have the ability to take some additional flow later on as land use changes. So there's a commercial industrial property that's even further north that's kind of outside of the study area. We wanted to make sure that we looked at that particular pipe segment because it's essentially nearing its capacity, its design capacity right now. So that might be something that has to be looked at as redevelopment occurs. The second one that we'll focus on here in the next slide is really a bottleneck, a well-known bottleneck. The city is very aware of the flow conditions in this location. That would be the yellow circle. And as we zoom in, you can see the black lines with the arrows is the current system. and the blue line would be the proposed system. And so through this area, we also make a connection to the Metropolitan Council interceptor. That interceptor is the main, basically the main discharge line, and really one of the most the northernmost manholes in Met Council's system. And that connection to that line is very critical. So you can see how the system has sort of morphed over the years. There's lots of turns, lots of 90-degree bends, lots of manholes, and the pipe size in that area is currently inadequate. That's based on current land use. And so as redevelopment occurs, this reroute that we have mapped out here, south along Lake Street and then back to the west, that would be south of the Lake Shops area, will be very critical in not only relieving that pressure on downtown, but improving the services to the buildings within the 5th Avenue and 11th Avenue zone. Our engineer's estimate, which includes street reconstruct, new manholes, new pipe, is right around $780,000. And again, since the current capacity is relatively limited in this area, these improvements really should happen sooner than later, because as redevelopment occurs and those potentially those flows increase, then those capacity issues are further perpetuated. Okay. I wanted to just give one brief update. We're also performing a stormwater assessment in the downtown area. This is critical not only for the current stormwater drainage system and assessing what those pipe capacities look like, very similar to the sanitary study, but rather rainfall and surface water. And then proposing some solutions here to meet water quality requirements for the watershed district. As these properties redevelop, the watershed district, Comfort Lake, Forest Lake Watershed District, will require stormwater management practices be constructed. So we're trying to get out ahead of that as well. So that study is happening concurrently, and we're doing some coordination with the watershed district there too. So just a quick brief update, but I'm going to open it up to questions now. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and we can definitely talk about it a little further too. So thank you again.
Thank you, Tim. Questions that members of the EDA and the Downtown Committee have of Tim? Jerry, go ahead. And you're on mute.
Tim, thank you for that explanation. One of my questions is, I couldn't quite determine it. Is the flow from the quote, the downtown district area actually impacted by that bottleneck down by Lake Shops? In other words, if redevelopment happens downtown, does that impact the downstream flow? And do you have to do that $780,000 project to do any redevelopment downtown?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And what you see in those maps is you see areas where we have limited pipe capacity, and then we're good on capacity for a little while, and then we go back to an issue. And really what you're doing is stacking flow. And so the more flow we add to those upper systems, even if they have capacity, we're continuing to just push that issue further and further downstream. This bottleneck area is, like I said before, has been a known issue for quite some time. And so making those improvements will certainly help alleviate the pressure on downtown when it redevelops. And then also, like I said, kind of just improve the service of that immediate area within the bottleneck, because those buildings are still going to have to discharge to that system. Right. And so pulling flow away allows for some additional capacity in those systems.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thank you for the answer.
Susan.
Two questions. One, are those bottlenecks due to the existing size of lines, or are those due to restrictions that have happened over time, broken pipes, narrowing of the pipes, et cetera, that could possibly be taken care of instead of a full reconstruct with some lining or cleaning? And the second question is, the Broadway area in the 2040 plan, 2 blocks to the north and 2 blocks to the south, is slated for redevelopment, and were those flows also taken into account when you're doing your modeling?
So I'm going to answer the second one first, and the answer to that one is yes. We did factor in those discharges. So any redevelopment within that restudy area, we looked at the change in flow. Sometimes it's an increase, sometimes it's a decrease, but we did look at those changes. to answer the first question, yeah, the real issue in that bottleneck area is a combination of inadequate pipe size. So what you really see in that area is you see lack of an increase in pipe size as you move downstream. And so as additional flow has been added on and those systems have not been improved, the capacity is hurt. One thing I didn't mention is that the City of Forest Lake has a very robust sanitary sewer maintenance program. And so they are, anytime there are street reconstruct projects or other construction in those areas, the city does a great job of televising those lines to see where repairs are needed. They do a lot of slip lining projects. So, you know, taking those pipes that are in disrepair and running a plastic liner through the middle to help mitigate those issues. And then also replacing old clay pipe with newer plastic pipe, depending on what's needed. So the city, I think, has a really great handle on potential capacity issues. And in this particular case, we're not seeing a lot of issue from what's called inflow and infiltration, which is that additional clear water inflow from rainfall, right? Due to just system deficiencies. But rather we're seeing that the compounding of additional flow from these different land uses are what's really causing those capacity issues.
Other questions of EDA or Lake Committees or Downtown Committee members? Mark, go ahead.
I don't really know at what point when, say, a hypothetical downtown development does happen in the core of downtown, where we reach that climactic moment where you really had to have improved that entire system to the tune of that larger dollar idea. But I get the impression from what you said that it wouldn't take much of a development downtown to suddenly run into that roadblock.
Yeah, great question. I have a similar. What's the tipping point, or what is kind of urgency versus opportunity?
The unfortunate reality is that under the current flow condition in that line, there is an issue. So any additional flow that's added doesn't necessarily change the fact that there's already an issue, but it just makes that issue worse.
And paint that picture for us. What is making that issue worse? What does that mean? How does that manifest itself?
Yeah, the important part about sanitary sewer flow is that you maintain the flow within the pipe diameter. As soon as the pressure starts to build in that pipe and you have more flow than what's in that pipe itself, it can cause major issues to the manholes themselves due to corrosion. It can cause backups in sewer lines. So all the sewer services that come into that system, they could start to see surcharging and backflow into basement areas, into wherever those service connections are made. We're seeing some pressurization of the system right now. This isn't a very deep storm or sanitary trunk line either. And so the shallower the system, the closer those services are to the surface and the more sensitive they are to potential backflow. And so when we see a pipe nearing its capacity or even performing under pressure, and by the way, again, this is all related to measured flow, then any additional flow that comes in could definitely exacerbate those types of issues. Okay, so it really comes down to a combination of things. The corrosion on the sewer system itself can cause major issues and bigger, more catastrophic failure later on down the road. It's not like that happens overnight, but over time it could. And then also the backup of those services. The more corrosion, the more potential for inflow and infiltration. As soon as clear water starts to come in, we have very high groundwater in this area, as you all are probably aware. The lake level is right there. So these pipes and these systems are sitting in groundwater essentially. So if they have holes in them and that water starts to come in, there's no capacity for the sanitary sewer system, and those backups can become much worse. Yeah, I don't want to paint a super doom and gloom scenario, but the reality is that this particular system, this bottleneck, is a current issue.
And current issue with today's capacity.
That's correct.
Okay. Finn, go ahead. And Susan, you're next. Finn, go ahead.
I mean, well, that tipping point is kind of critical. Let's just say whatever comes on board that's new in the downtown area pushes this button. What kind of a construction timetable is there once a go is given to improve that system? Is it a long-term proposition?
Well, that's probably a question better served by the City of Forest Lake representatives that are on the call right now. So maybe I'll reserve that for Dan or Mr. Casey to discuss. But what we're doing with this assessment is looking at a potential reroute for that sanitary sewer to look at increasing capacity both in the bottleneck area, but also for the downtown locations and making that connection to the Met Council interceptor. And then assigning some estimated costs to that. In terms of timing, I don't know, maybe Mr. Casey can speak to that if he's comfortable.
Yeah, I think we have to put it in our repair or upgrade plan. We have to look and see once we have the study, what the cost is and then what the best time to do this. We don't want to disturb anything if we don't have to, but sooner or later we're gonna have to do that. So we haven't planned on repairing this yet. I think that's an internal discussion for the next few years of when we can best afford to do it and what the timing is to do it. So I don't have a good answer for you right now, but we have to talk about it internally here.
So the motivation to improve the line comes with whatever impetus comes with the development.
Or before, yeah.
Right.
I was just in my brain reminded too of a conversation I had with Ryan Goodman, the city engineer, regarding a MnDOT cooperative project too on Highway 61. I think that's coming in the next few years, if I'm not mistaken, Pat. And so that might be a good time to look at, reconstructing that storm sewer, that sanitary sewer system when the roadway project comes through. You can save a lot of money by combining those two projects.
Yeah, and I think the point is that we don't want to wait until we have a new proposal for downtown ready to go and we say, well, we just got to wait a minute, we got to fix the sewer. But I think we do have to plan for it. And like Tim said, if there's an opportunity to do it when roadway's done, that'll save us some more money. So we'll have to talk internally about where that's slotted.
But slotted, am I hearing, I appreciate we haven't given you budget or timeline to do this yet. I get that this comes back to council making those decisions, but is the thought that we try to slot that in ahead of development and kind of put it into the city's going to do this for existing infrastructure rather than, I think there's other times we look for those types of improvements and we look for that to be a partnership with future development. And what I'm hearing from you is more of a city doing it for existing infrastructure rather than building into future development.
Yeah, this is more of an upgrade or a repair versus an extension that we see in a lot of development we have. So we would try to do that, I think, before development. A new development downtown would come, whenever that may be. But again, take into consideration if there's an opportunity to partner with MnDOT to do that, to make it more affordable, save some money to the taxpayers. So again, it's just a matter of, we'll try to get to it as soon as we can. It's just a matter of how it fits into the overall program of the sewer upgrades and replacement.
Patrick, I know you're working on currently a 10-year financial plan. Is this something that you see worked into that? I mentioned that because I know not everyone that's is part of this meeting maybe has visibility to that process.
Well, that and the sewer utility stands on its own as far as funding and resources go. So that's always taken into consideration what the construction is, what we can afford to do, whether we pay for it in cash or whether we have to bond for it. So that's in tandem with the 10-year, but really the sewer plan, just like the water plan is kind of an independent on its own. So it funds itself. So it's part of what we look at when we're looking at all of the finances and all the construction that we need to do, whether it's streets or sewer or anything else.
I'm still left thinking that once a development, and who knows when and how big and what it will be, knocks on the door for downtown, we will judge it then on an engineering premise and decide whether the existing line could tolerate that step forward, or we would try and fix the system And it still depends on what that development is that comes to town and says, we want to move. And then it could be a year kind of program to upgrade the system.
Yeah, I think what we would try to do first is determine what needs to be done and when it's best advantageous to the city to do it as far as financially goes and timing wise goes. If in the meantime we get a development and that pushes us forward and the development relies on more capacity that we have to do it, then we'll have to try to see what we can do to move that up. You know, we don't have an answer about when the development's coming or why, but so only thing we really can do right now is plan for what we believe is the best timing. And then if situations change, go back and look at it again. So I guarantee you we're not going to try to say, no, you can't come because we have to fix a sewer. That's something we're going to do.
What this assessment is given the city too is a tool to make those minor changes in flow and see how that affects the system. And so we have a really great calculator now for determining what those impacts are on the system. And so if it's one parcel or 10 parcels, we can change that flow. We can modify that flow to determine what those impacts would be, or if they're worse, than what's out there now. So.
Susan, I think you had another question. Go ahead.
Were your flow rates taken before the restaurants on the north end or north of the Lake and Broadway roundabout were in? And we also have one that is temporarily closed. So how would those flows affect your modeling, your current modeling? And Patrick, I appreciated your comment about the sewer fund and the water fund being separate entities, enterprise entities. I don't know currently what bonding capacity the city has for those kind of activities.
Just to quickly answer the bonding, we have plenty of bonding capacity. So that will not be, if we have to go and move quick and we have to bond for it, based on our current bonding capacity, we're fine. So it's just a matter of getting there and determining cost and when we do it and if it's included with a whole bunch of other projects at the same time.
So those flows were measured in late 2019 into January of 2020. So I'm not entirely sure if that fits into the timeline. We really were looking for measuring school flow as well. So thankfully we were able to capture that before students were sent home in 2020. But as far as the restaurants on the north end, I'm not entirely sure how the timing was related to those. But what I can say is that we do take those measured flows and calibrate the entire model. So in some form, all of the flow is being considered from all land uses and really calibrated then to those measured flows. So it's probably a yes and no, but I'm not sure what the timing was on those restaurants. Probably relatively minor compared to the overall system flow. So maybe not a super sensitive factor because the study area is so big.
I've got a question about, just to clarify on the financing of it. There would not be any assessment to property owners for this?
Did not say that.
Okay, well, then the part two of the question is, if you've got somebody that wants to come to town and might be a high volume user, they need to know that they might be getting assessed on this property that they're looking at buying. Right?
Yes, and to be honest with you, since it's a repair, I'm not sure we would assess, but I'm not going to rule that out. But it all depends on what the development is and what it brings to the city before I'll comment on what that deal is going to be and if they're going to be assessed or not. I mean, initially the plan would be to repair it as an expense of the city, not because we don't have anybody to assess. We'd like to have it repaired long before somebody comes in town, if that's possible, so that we don't have to worry about you know, if we put a 50-story building up and the capacity is way too much, so we'd rather have that problem solved now, so it's just taken out of the equation. But again, reserve comment on how we're going to fund it, when we're going to fund it, in the project year, so until we get a better handle on what we're doing.
Other questions of Tim or staff or general comments on this topic? I think one of the goals of this group and one of the goals of these studies is to take some of the unknowns out of the equation, and to, you know, wherever there's an unknown, there's risk. And at least while we now have the study results, and we now know what that looks like, and we know what some of those capacities are, and are able to act accordingly. So it's valuable information to have, and hopefully removes one of the barriers to developing downtown. Tim, I know you'll be coordinating. I know you'll be kind of coordinating with staff, and certainly Ryan, on next steps related to this and timing. Any other immediate action that you would recommend that this body take at this time, or consider at this time based on the study?
No, I don't think so. I think that the information, just conveying the information to this group was the most important part, and making sure that everybody knew that there are some utility conflicts within the area that need to be resolved, and if that timeline needs to be more immediate than we originally thought, then that's really critical information. So
that's helpful. All right. Thank you for being here tonight, and we appreciate the hard work and thoroughness on this project.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Our next agenda item this evening is a BRNE program update and check-in. Dan, I think you were going to provide some updates.
All right, I am president of the EDA. I just wanted to give just a quick check-in on the BRNE program. Especially considering this group has membership that is not necessarily core EDA members. It kind of expands out beyond that. I just wanted to also bring some awareness to a couple of the business programs that the EDA is currently working on. The BRNE check-in, so the BRNE is the Business Retention and Expansion Program. We started working on this at the EDA level back in June of 20. The intent of the program is to reach out to local businesses to gain a better understanding of the issue that they're currently facing. These programs will typically focus on both retention of existing businesses and expansion efforts as well. This particular one, we're really going to focus on the retention period, the retention aspect of it, especially in light of COVID-19. We want to make sure that we're really focusing on retaining the businesses that we have here in the city of Forest Lake. The main component of the BRNE program is a business survey that we're doing. The EDA members are going to go out and start doing some business survey work. So members of the EDA, last week you should have all received your list of businesses to survey. I do want to give a specific thank you to Nanette for help with that business list. I would not have been able to get all that contact information and that list assembled as quickly as I did had it not been for her help. So I want to say thank you to Nanette for her help on that list. The EDA will start doing their survey work from now through November 9th. It's an approximately a 14-question survey that we're asking businesses to answer. It takes about 7 minutes to complete. After November, we'll take those results and we'll start to compile and do the analysis of the results that came back. Have a full presentation to bring back to the EDA and to this group in January of 2021. We have also, as part of this program, through the course of doing this survey work, if we see any businesses that are in need of an immediate either assistance or they need help, we do have red flag warning sessions scheduled at the EDA. Obviously, being cognizant of the fact that we're maintaining confidentiality, we're not going to call that business out unless they want to be called, discussed publicly. We do have those scheduled for October 12th and November 9th. So we do have this program up and running right now. basically just wanted to let the downtown committee, make them aware that this program is up and operational right now. And then specifically to the EDA, is just asking, do you have any concerns about the list that you guys got last week? Or do you guys need any additional resources as you start to do the business surveying? So it's just initial checking with the EDA and awareness for the downtown committee. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or receive any comments on the program.
Very good. Any questions? Either overall program questions, goal questions from members of the downtown council, or any tactical questions that members of the EDA may have?
No, I received my list last week. It looked great. So I really appreciate you putting that together. And Annette, thanks for your help in getting that put out. So I look forward to jumping into those here very shortly.
I have similar comments. Thank you for the work in getting that out. So, all right. Not seeing any other questions or feedback, and I'm not seeing all participants here on screen. So if I'm missing you, if you're raising your hand and I'm not, if I'm missing you, please jump in. Let's move on to our next agenda item and our final agenda item for the evening, CARES Act Business Grant Program. Dan, you have an update for us on that as well?
I do, President, members of the EDA. I just want to give a brief update on the CARES Act grant program. If you recall, we launched this back at the first EDA and council meeting in September, which the date escapes me right now, but I think it was on the 9th we launched this program. The policy that we approved allows for both for-profit and nonprofit applications to apply for this pool of funding. The grant amounts for employer-based businesses are up to $15,000. If you're self-employed or a non-employer-based home-based business, up to $7,500. And for nonprofits, they qualify for up to $15,000 on this program. We allocated a total of $300,000 to the program, and the application went live on investinforestlake.com on September 16th. Based on the current number of applications that we have, as of this afternoon, we have received a total of 37 applications. The response has been way beyond what I originally anticipated. When I spoke with other cities, other counties, other entities that have these programs in place, they're saying sort of a slow response to this program. We have had a phenomenal response, have had 37 applications. Total right now, initial grant requests, if we just looked at what they've requested based on the initial applications, we're right around $500,000 to the point. So we are well beyond our initial pool of money. And I think part of that response, it does underscore the ability of local governments to really identify the need and reach into the business community that other maybe levels of government don't have direct access to. I was reading an article over the weekend about when the Paycheck Protection Program was launched. They found that the smaller local banks had much better participation. They were able to get those funds out. That was based on the connections that they had with their business community. So they're saying that the bigger branches, the Wells Fargo, the US banks had a harder time getting that funds out in the community, but the smaller community banks were much more effective at getting it out. And I think you're starting to see that here, where maybe some of the bigger cities, there may be a barrier for people to apply, but here, I mean, the response rate has been phenomenal here. Where we're currently at, based on the current responses, is that it's looking like we're only going to be able to fund the for-profit applications at this point. I do anticipate that total number to come down just based on they have to go through the underwriting process. I have to make sure that the expenses, are there, that they have had the revenue losses. So there will be some shifting within that for-profit, but if I kind of take a look at where most of that ask is, I am anticipating that most of those funds will be spent on for-profit applications. I have started working on contacting the applicants and asking for additional information. To date, they've been really responsive in getting that information back to me. I'm also going to start working with MMCD to confirm that whatever Washington County, if the business has applied for both the city grant and the Washington County grant, I need to confirm that we're not paying for the same funds twice. So I'm working with them to make sure that we're not double dipping on the expense side of it. I don't anticipate that to be much of an issue. When looking at, the few that have come in so far is that the revenues are trending with what we see nationally, where revenues are sort of, flat, maybe going up a little bit in January, February, then all of a sudden March hits and you just see it nosedive down March, April, May, then they start to come back up. So what I'm seeing locally does trend with what the national, trends are for small businesses. So I anticipate with that significant loss of revenue that we should be able to find expenses that will be able to be covered by both the city program and the county program. Like I said, we're going through the underwriting process. The timeline still looks good for October 12th to bring the approvals back to the EDA and for funding, then on the 26th. I'm also working with the city attorney just to get the grant agreements drafted. So we have the agreements will be ready to go on the 12th. We will need signed grant agreements from both the businesses and the EDA prior to issuance of the check. But as of right now, everything on this program is tracking well. So happy to answer any questions the EDA or the downtown committee has, or take any comments at this time.
Some minor logistics questions. Are we funding that technically through the EDA, or is it funded through the city, supported programmatically through the EDA? It's going through the EDA, but there'll be a transfer from CARES Act of the council down to the EDA, since the EDA is the approving body. So from a technical standpoint, when the total amount is known, so what that total amount is, we'll make sure that the transfer matches that total amount. So we're just sort of waiting to get the final approval on everything, and then the transfer will take place. So it's we know exactly where those funds went and how they were spent. Other questions? Sam, go ahead, and you're on mute.
My question is for Dan on CARES Act funding. Are we keeping that stuff pretty much private? I mean, who's involved and who's applying, receiving, and that kind of thing? Yeah,
I mean, like the business information, like the actual, what I'm seeing on the underwriting side. I mean, we are making sure that doesn't become part of the public. I mean, keeping what we can keep private, so that's classified business information. So that's not going to be put on any agenda packet or anything like that. That's going to be kept. We're keeping that information private per data practices, and then what we have to release publicly, we're going to release publicly. But yeah, you're not going to see.
Well, that's the answer I'm looking.
Yeah, you're not going to see the month over month.
Yeah, that's the answer I'm looking for.
Yeah, no, that's private.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Dan.
The award list by amount, though, is public data, correct?
Correct. The total amount, but you're not going to see annual, income, all that type of stuff. That's private business information at this point. We'll work to make sure that does stay private business information.
Other question?
Yeah, this
Lee,
is
go ahead.
Anderson with Fireside Getaway. Do you see any programs coming out for new businesses? I mean, we need grants or funds just as much as established business, if not more.
Bob, your question, that is a good question. I mean, at this point, with our current grant program, we are making sure that we have to follow the federal standards. So unless the federal standards change, to allow, for a brand new business to be funded, we have to follow those federal, standards. I'm not aware of any new programs that are currently in the pipeline, but that can change, with anything that comes out if there's a second round, of funding, those standards could change. But right now, I'm not aware of any. I don't know if Chris has any awareness of any new programs that are coming down the pipeline.
President Bain and members, good afternoon. Good evening.
Good afternoon.
So the Open to Business program would be one that I would recommend, and Tyler Hilsebeck is the Washington County Open to Business advisor, and they do have somewhat flexible terms on there. It's a loan, it's not a grant, but they do have the ability to defer payments or make it such that it lines up more with the cash flow of the business. And so I would encourage you to reach out and talk with Tyler Hilsebeck, and I think the Open to Business program might be a possible resource that may be of interest to you.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, well, if you hear of any new programs, can you make that knowledge public then?
Absolutely. We'll make sure we'll get them out, and we'll get them out using the same channels that we did with the city's grant program as well.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions related to the CARES Act Business Grant Program? Go ahead.
Yeah, I do. I'm sorry.
Oh, go
Initially,
ahead, Blake.
sorry. So initially, I think what was 300,000, but the remaining money from the CARES Act that the city received, I think their balance was 450. Is there any appetite to increase that since there is such a response, and/or is there an opportunity to getting additional funds from the county? Chris, maybe you can speak to this. At one point, it seemed like there was only half that money that was applied for. Would they have to go directly to the county, or is there a way to get additional funds? And again, the first question would be, is there still money to increase that budget to closer to the 450 since the response has been so good?
Dan, do you want to start? And then I can jump in.
Yeah, and I think to Blake's question, I mean, we'll look at where we are total on funding, you know, where we are with the total request at the end when everything goes through. You know, right now I haven't closed the application period just for that exact reason, where if we do identify additional funds, I want to make sure that we have applications ready to go, because the window on when we have to get these funds expensed is November 15th, and doesn't leave a lot of time to do a version 2 of the application process. So I'm still collecting applications, even though we're already in excess of that 300,000. So if we do have extra money, you know, that can, you know, potentially definitely be applied for this program moving forward at the local level.
And then if I may, President Bain, on the county side, we did close the second round on Thursday last week and had an additional 9 applications from businesses from Forest Lake. If you remember back to the first round, we had about 20. So total of 29 from Forest Lake. I can tell you that we have not gone through the full $10 million yet at the county that was allocated for the small business grants. And I can also, don't know exactly what's going to happen yet, but there is an upcoming workshop on October 6th that the county board will talk about perhaps a third round of funding. And that one might just be a pipeline that is left open until such a time where we either run out of money or run out of time. So my instinct tells me that there likely will be another round of funding coming up at the county level. So stay tuned.
Chris, a follow up to that. Is the county time bound by the same timeline that the city is as far as distribution of funds? Or do you have, since you're kind of the next layer up in the flow, do you have a longer timeline than we do?
So President Bain, that's a very good question. The timeline is just a little bit longer at the county, but it's not much. It's only a couple of weeks. And so my understanding is that the cities have until November 15th to spend the money. And then December 1st, it goes to the county. And then after the county, it goes to the state and back to the federal government. So we really, truly do lose it at the end of the year.
And to further context around Blake's question, Blake had asked the question of, you know, the city received approximately $1.5 million. We had identified as a city just over $1 million as the initial budget. We had set aside the $300,000 for the EDA. And the question is what happens in the remainder. And I know one of council's motivations in setting the $300,000 to the EDA for this grant program is to allow that $1 million were estimates, and some of those are still being trued up. And so there is part of what Dan's speaking towards is there is an opportunity here for true up and to see where those estimates are coming in at, and to see if there's any flexibility in what that final approval amount looks like. Lots of moving pieces of estimates under a tight timeline. So trying to be as transparent and thorough as possible. And Leif, I think you had a question that perhaps.
Exact same as Blake was asking. So we're on the same wavelength.
Excellent. Any other questions on this topic? I guess for any of the business leaders on the call or in the meeting today, and Nanette, I'm interested in any feedback you've heard from businesses on the application process. No time like the present to collect. Hopefully we're still not doing CARES Act funding next year, but should we have to do this type of a process again? Any lessons learned or any feedback that we should be taking into consideration?
Dan, I wanted to confirm that the application closes on the 30th, September 30th, correct?
That is correct, yes.
I did have a couple of calls today just for feedback since you asked that they felt that that they were asked for a little bit more information than even at the county or the deed level. And so that was a little bit of information. And mostly, I don't know if it's just a lack of communication meaning that do they need to provide all of their expenses or just the ones that are qualifiable for the funds that they're asking for? So that was the question today. Does it make sense, Dan?
Yeah, and because from the expense side, that I actually worked on last week, there's actually a workbook, an expense workbook that does go through pretty detailed. It's a self-totaling workbook that they can download off the city's website. And when you go through, like, once you pass the initial review, you get an email that says, you know, provide additional documentation. That goes through all the expenses that you fill in the category, the vendor description, the date, and the total. So, and it does give examples of what qualifies for an expense. And then, you know, so there is some additional information that does get sent out to the applicants. And I've been also fielding phone calls from, you know, business owners, and if they have questions, I'm happy to walk them through, you know, the application process as needed.
So Dan, just to clarify then, if I've given Washington County for that application this set of expenses, you're not looking for that. You're just looking for the expenses that I'm sending in to you to be covered, right? Because
correct. So the example that I put on the application was like, if you're covering May's payroll, that's covered by a Washington County grant application. Don't apply for May's payroll on the cities, but you could apply for June, July's, or August, so a different month's payroll on there. So just as long as we're not paying the same month, the same expenses twice, basically.
Any other questions on the program? Thank you, Jen, for the update. And I know you've become an underwriter in the last couple of weeks, so much appreciated on all of the hard work on the administration and answering all the questions. So,
Dan, can I just give you some other feedback too? They did, I did hear from multiple businesses saying that the information was very straightforward. The application process was great, that they were amazed at how quickly you got all of that up and running. And even just our communication and working with you to get that out to our businesses. I was amazed at how quickly and how effectively we were able to launch that program. So thanks again for all your hard work.
My pleasure.
It's great to hear. Any other questions on that topic? All right, that is the end of our planned agenda this evening, although I will just open it up if there's any other general questions, any other updates anyone would like to give. And while you ponder that, I will just say this is our planned fourth Monday of the month. And so this group will meet again the fourth Monday of October. And if I were better, I would have that date in my back pocket. It is actually October 26th. This group will meet again on October 26th. EDA, we will plan to have an EDA meeting at 5:30 on Monday, October 12th. All right, I am not seeing any other questions this evening or any other updates. Thank you all for being here, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn. This is Jenny.
Motion to
I'll
adjourn.
second it, Mar.
And a
I'll
second,
second it.
and a second from Sam. And Karen, could we do a quick roll call vote for adjournment, please?
Sure. Commissioner Roberts. I think I saw you, but you're on mute.
Aye.
Commissioner.
Sorry.
Commissioner Councilmember Husnick.
Aye.
Commissioner Fenneman.
Aye.
Commissioner Lorge.
Aye.
Commissioner Erickson.
Aye.
And President Bain.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.